Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the first select board meeting of the new year, 10th of January. I have a roll call, please.
Capiello here.
Gibson here.
Joseph here. Bailey here.
Manstrack here, fine. Could I ask you all to join me for allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Select board. Any comments about the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the January 10th, 2023 agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Very good. We did that. Public comment. Before we get to public comment, I have a comment that I feel I need to make. Last, or 2 weeks ago, there was an incident at the transfer station, in which someone wasn't aware of the rule when it was explained what the regulation was. He were harassed and harangued the employee at the transfer station, causing her great concern. Actually, she felt threatened and called on police. Police came. They also had trouble and finally explained the regulation and how it was laid out, and the person left. There was an apology, but there's an apology for making mistakes about not knowing all the rules and the regulations as they're explained, but bad behavior to individuals, especially our employees who work very hard and execute the instructions and directions that are put up by this board. I think it's totally unacceptable and won't happen. If you have a complaint about the regulations or the rules, the select board is the place to come. We're responsible for that. Our emails and telephone numbers are on the website. If you want to contact us about these rules and regulations, be happy to talk to you about it. We'll evaluate it and talk about them. But behavior of berating and harassing our employees is not acceptable and won't be tolerated. I think we have, police have made some representations of that as well. That's my comment. It's now time. Anyone else from the board? Very good. Thank you. It's time for public comment. Again, this is public comment, not a discussion of the budget, which will come later. Each speaker is provided a single opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. Public comment is not to have this, comments or questions since this may not be answered by the select board, because we may not have reached a position of discussion on the matter. Not a two-way dialogue between the speaker, the select board, and the town administrator. Having said that, anyone like to make a public comment? Mr. Howe.
Thank you. I'll keep this as short as possible. This is concerning the proposed warrant articles. I downloaded off of the site that were included with the town administrator's agenda for tonight. And I reviewed those proposed warrant articles, and I'm extremely unhappy with some of them. Proposed zoning changes for Articles 3 and 4 regarding home occupations, that is, home businesses, strikes me as a blatant attempt to steal people's property rights. This town has no business dictating how much anyone uses the inside of their houses for business purposes, as long as the structure is still used as a home. Further, they aren't forcible, short of violating the privacy of those homeowners. Finally, not only are these actively hostile to the development and growth of new businesses in town, but they prevent any pathway for home occupation to transition from a sole proprietorship or partnership into a small business prior to transitioning to a larger, medium, or large size business. Proposed zoning change, Article 6, strikes me as being an absurdity. Having a connecting roof does not constitute an attachment between buildings. In fact, no building should be considered connected without a continuous, completely enclosed structure. At the very least, we're talking about fully walled, fully floored, and roofed hallway with utilities running from one building to another. Proposed zoning change, Article 7, concerning temporary signage for elections is a clear violation of the First Amendment. And finally, the proposed noise ordinance, Article 27, seems to me to be a bit too vague and subjective to go and be allowed to happen. So, and that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir, please.
Good evening. Randall Heller, 113 Toland Road. And I noticed this evening on our agenda, there is a vote that is going to take place regarding noise ordinance. And I confess to not knowing the details of that noise ordinance, but I would hope that it encompasses the use of air compression brakes, also known as Jake brakes, within residential neighborhoods. It's not a common occurrence, but when it does occasionally happen, it's extremely disruptive. In fact, to some degree, it's earth shaking. For example, in the city of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, there are signs posted throughout residential neighborhoods stating no use of Jake brakes or air compression brakes in residential neighborhoods. And that would not, of course, include Route 125, but it would include Toland Road, where I happen to live. And as I say, it's an occasional occurrence. When it does happen, it's earth shaking. So I don't know if that is encompassed within the noise ordinance, but it would be something worth considering. Thank you.
Anyone else? Russell?
Yes. All right, Robert Russell, 99 Toland Road. First thing, I'm not going to get into anything regarding this. I have 4 petition warrant articles with approximately 40 signatures each. These are the originals. Doesn't have to be any drama. I simply want to hand them in.
Okay,
May I approach?
please.
Thank you.
It needs to be turned over, and eventually the supervisor checklist.
Yes.
Will confirm the signatures, and if they're confirmed, I suspect they will be presented at the deliberative session for discussion.
Familiar with the process.
Right.
Regarding your comment about the transfer station, that was me. I wish you would just say it. I'm sitting right in front of you. I think the events were a little bit different than how you portrayed them. You would think it was an extremely egregious situation. I think Aaron Paradis's allegiance to the town have greatly skewed what actually happened. And I do think what occurred is a violation of my First Amendment rights. I think the town has showed a history of allowing other events to happen at that exact location, of which I have evidence to show. And this may end up becoming an issue. At no time did I get threatening. If I was threatening, she should have had me arrested. I talked to Chief Joy. At no time did he say he was investigating a criminal issue. I'm pulling the 911 tapes from Stratford Dispatch because it was called in as a man with a gun. I never had any firearm exposed, if I was even carrying a firearm. And that ups the situation significantly when you call the police and you tell them someone has a firearm. And if you can't see it, you shouldn't assume there's a gun there. That affects my safety. That affects the safety of people around. And that's in the dispatch notes. You can read that yourself. And there's pictures of me there, and I clearly have a full coverage jacket. So I have some great concerns over how that was handled, and that'll be brought up later. Thank you.
Rob, I got a quick question.
Yes,
Are you gonna ask for the body cam footage too?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
I'm in the process of obtaining all of it.
I can answer that quickly. It won't be provided.
Thank you.
There's no release under 91A for body cam footage. It's specifically covered in the body cam stuff.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online? If you're on Outlook, or Teams rather, you'll press the mute, unmute yourself, be recognized. If you're on telephone, if you'll push *6, wait to be recognized and come off mute.
Not seeing anything virtually, Mr. Chair.
Could I just make a comment about Article 7, Michael? I think you said political signs when you were describing that zoning, and this is very clearly worded by the planning board to include all signs, and it does not address political signs.
Okay, then we're going to close public comment. First, is there a school board representative on the street? Not to this point. I'll talk about it a little bit later. When we get to our reports. All right. What we propose to do is go through each of the warrant articles. We'll talk about, Mr. McIver will give a briefing on the budget and budget process. And then we'll discuss each of the articles as we go through. And then we can comment on each of these articles as we go through the conversation. Mr. McIver?
Perfect. Okay, so I have a couple of presentations on the different topics, the different public hearings for tonight. Obviously, the select board, we've started this process back in October. All of this is very familiar to you. The benefit of the public hearing is to not only make sure that the public has an opportunity to opine about this before it goes to deliberative session, but also being recorded. This will serve as a resource that we can put out and make sure that even if people aren't participating live right now, they have access to the information and can review a synopsis of the process. So I'll go through the presentation as quickly and efficiently as possible, make sure there's opportunity for questions at the end. As I plug the whole time, barrington.nh.gov/2023 budget has the entire budget binder, every document. It's all updated to reflect the current position of the budget, what was submitted from department heads, the advisory budget committee minutes, and on and on. So that's a great resource if folks have questions as well. So real quick, high level summary, we're going to talk about the budget, which represents an 8% increase. Importantly, you can't talk about the budget without talking about revenue, and we anticipate a 7% increase in revenue in 2023. We'll talk about the increases, primarily inflation and staffing. We'll talk about how busy Barrington is, what we do with those appropriations. We'll talk about how big Barrington is, and then we'll talk a little bit about how small the municipal tax rate is. So again, this is the budget public hearing, so we're going to talk about the budget. On this slide, I show the 2022 appropriations and the 2023 appropriations, the dollar amount change and the percentage change. Again, this is that 8% increase in the operating budget, 7% increase in revenue. And so the net impact of that is about $350,000 in additional tax effort. This is your property taxes. And the tax rate impact that will be included on the warrant article is 24 cents or $78 on the tax bill of a $325,000 property. So $325,000 property, there's a document on the budget binder webpage that shows where that number comes from. We did an analysis of all of the households in Barrington. That's the new update, up from 300,000, which is what we've used in years recent. Obviously, if your property is valued more than that, your impact will be higher. If it's valued less than that, your impact will be less. So talking about the increases, like I said, there's two primary categories, inflation and staffing. So inflation, this isn't a surprise to anybody that pays attention, and especially their pocketbook, where they're going to the grocery store, filling up their car, or trying to heat their home. So the 18-month CPI average is 9.71%. And we experienced that not only this year when we were trying to spend the 2022 appropriations and stay within budget, but there's obviously an impact in 2023. I hit some of the high categories here. First, vehicle fuel. Our vehicle fuel utilization is down 10%, which is great. That's using our vehicles and taxpayer dollars efficiently. Unfortunately, because prices are up so much, the budget increase is just shy of $60,000. Paving. So the select board invested in a pavement management plan, which lays out how we can stay on top of our bad roads and keep our good roads good. And unfortunately, asphalt being a petroleum derivative, the increase in cost for paving has also been astronomical. This $50,000 just barely allows us to do the same amount we did last year, $600,000 budget. We're also asking for the same $100,000 appropriation as a separate warrant article, but inflation there has been huge. Salt. So I know we talked about this at the board level, but after we set the 2022 budget, our salt prices increased over 50%, and the budget was set. So we had to spend within that budget and deal with that in 2022. So most of the increase in the salt price actually comes from the 2022 increase, not 2023. But the increase in the 2023 budget over 2022 is 45,000. Electricity and heating fuel, those speak for themselves. Fortunately, we're not big users of electricity. We do use a fair amount of heating fuel, but we have been actively taking steps to reduce our utilization. We'll talk about that a little later when we talk about the Energy Capital Reserve and the work of the Energy Committee. So now staffing. Again, this is the second big category of increases in the 2023 budget. Wages and benefits reflect 60% of the total operating budget in Barrington. And the listing that you see here on the slide is each one of the components of wages and benefits which have impacted the budget. I'll hit most of them. Now, one of the things that we talked about quite a few times at select board meetings over the year is the shifting of costs from the school. They stopped providing facility management services for the town. We hired a facility manager. They canceled the custodial services contract. We hired a custodian. And so those costs are to maintain the level of service, not even add any additional service. The select board invested in a wage study addressing the recruitment and retention problems to make sure that we were meeting the market with wages and benefits for employees. And so this budget includes the implementation of those recommendations. Late in the year in 2022, the select board authorized the addition of a 4th full-time firefighter EMT in the fire department. So that budget is, the funds for that are budgeted in 2023. I will note that we separated out the wages and benefits, and the benefits or the wages for 2023 are actually going to come from the ambulance revolving fund, which reduced the budget impact by about $45,000. And so that was something the fire chief offered when he suggested the position, and helped make some room in the budget as we finalized it. The library is proposing some changes to their FTE, transitioning full-time to part-time and part-time to full-time. So those costs are included in the budget. And then there's general census changes that we have throughout the year, an update for the 2023 proposal. There have also been some decreases. So these aren't all of them, but these are the bigger ones. So there's no longer any rental budget. We don't rent a town hall or a storage unit anymore because we have a town hall that we own, which is fantastic. The transfer station utilization is down based on the rules and regulations and the fee schedule. And so the budget can be reduced there, 26,000. Bond interest. So of course, when we moved into this building, we expected that we would be paying a bond for 25 or 30 years. Because we received a $1.5 million grant from the federal government, there's no ongoing cost, bond cost to this building, just maintenance and operating costs. And so that does not need to be in the budget. Talked about the facility manager. One of the things that we did to lessen the impact of adding that position and picking up the slack, and to make sure that we took good care of our facilities, is we transitioned to part-time, the part-time wages, $20,000 that were in the highway department, and moved those to the facility manager. And one of the duties and responsibilities of the working facility manager will be to fill those duties and responsibilities in the highway department during winter maintenance. And finally, vehicle maintenance. So we have a vastly improved maintenance program in the highway department and newer vehicles. And so we were able to reduce that budget 2023 as well. So this is what the warrant article looks like. I won't read it, but it's $8.279 million. The default budget is just over $8 million. Again, the 24 cents on the tax rate and $78 on a $325,000 property. The select board later tonight will be asked to vote, make their recommendation vote, which will be included on the warrant article. And the advisory budget committee will be meeting tomorrow to record their recommendation votes going into deliberative session. So we talked about our appropriations. We talked about some of the services provided by the town and what is changing. Now we need to talk about how we're going to pay for them. Obviously, what comes to mind most immediately for folks is their property taxes. The 2022 was the first year that property taxes actually represented less than 50% of the funding that we use for our appropriations. It's 49% this year, and it's still the biggest chunk. But there's a lot more to the equation than just property taxes. So this is the 2022 tax rate of $19.85, and only $3 of that is the municipal portion. And so here's that pie chart. $3 represents 15% of the total tax rate. And so, of course, you know, that this is what we have control over. This is what's under our jurisdiction. Mr. Bailey.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I have a question. How do we rate for the rest of the state, please?
Stay tuned.
Thank you very much.
I've got some charts and maps that will address that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So where do we get the other 51%? So that's vehicle registrations, fees for service, the transfer stations, a good example of that. State and federal aid, which has increased in recent years, the state aid through meals and rooms tax, and other miscellaneous sources. So here's that pie chart. You see the 49% that's property tax. A quarter comes from vehicle registrations, which is something that we haven't seen an increase in, and we're not budgeting an increase for 2023. Best analysis shows that it's a result of inflation and availability of new vehicles, but that's a big portion of our revenue comes from motor vehicle registrations, state and federal aid, fees for service, and miscellaneous categories. We're budgeting a 7.23% increase in locally collected revenue, and that's what helps us offset the additional appropriations. So something we're very proud of in 2022, we were able to secure over $2.3 million in grants. This is money in addition to the appropriations approved by voters. And these grants have allowed us to meet the needs of residents without going to the residents and asking for additional appropriations. We bought a stretcher and AEDs. We replaced the computers in the police department. We've got a generator on order for this building. Obviously, we talked about the $1.5 million. All of this, it doesn't happen accidentally. This is represents countless hours of work by employees to track this money down, to do right by the residents of Barrington, and get everything that we can out of the money that they appropriate and pay in their taxes. And, you know, I hear sometimes that some of these programs are, these granting programs may be frivolous and adding to federal debt and things like that, which is a very good point. But from my perspective, if we're not trying to get as much of that money to Barrington, we're doing a disservice to the residents of Barrington because they're paying into it and it's debt that they're going to experience. So the more that we can get back to benefit the residents of Barrington, the better off that they are, regardless of your opinion or perspective of the policy decisions of making money like this available. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do. This is just a quick snapshot of the various corners of municipal government. So we keep track of over 5,000 individual parcels. So this is assessed values and updating records on each one of those properties. Issued over 750 building permits. We talked about the $2.3 million in grants. Fire and ambulance responded to 1,100 calls. The highway department maintains 80 miles of roads. Land use, both the zoning board and the planning board processed 75 applications in 2022, which is a tremendous amount of work, not only for the citizen volunteers, but also for the staff. The library is an astronomical number. There were over 67,000 borrowed items from the library. The police department responded to almost 20,000 events or calls. The recreation department put on over 40 programs and catered to 44,650 participants. The tax office issued bills and collected receipts for $27 million in property taxes. The town clerk registered 13,000 vehicles. And this number always surprises me. We have 9,400 residents. There's 2,200 registered dogs in Barrington. And that's not even all of them. We know that there's unregistered dogs in Barrington. That's a huge number. Transfer station, so 1,500 tons of trash and 463 tons of recycling in 2022. And so that snapshot, that's what we do with your $3 per thousand, the 15% of your tax rate. That's what we do. That's what we provide for services. So, Mr. Bailey, you asked about how we stack up to other communities, and this is the second year now that I've done this analysis and touched on this information. And I really find it interesting. I'll move through it quickly. It's all available on the website. You can go back and look more specifically. But we talk about Barrington's rural character. Top to bottom, what a tenet of our local government is working to maintain and preserve the rural character of Barrington, which is really an uphill task because Barrington isn't small. So we'll look at 3 categories of data which really show the size of Barrington compared to the rest of the state. And this is based on 230 towns and cities. And so unfortunately, by the end of December, when I pulled this data down, there were still 4 towns that didn't have their tax rate set yet, so they were excluded. You'll see them on the map. Anyway, so this is population. Pretty good number to look at when you're trying to understand the impact of municipal services. At 9,400 residents, we're in the 87th percentile statewide. So this is a map. This is what that looks like. The red towns and cities, 198 of them. Barrington is bigger by population than all of those towns and cities across the state. And there's only 31 that are bigger than Barrington. And so the 87th percentile, you see the population centers, you see the Concord, the Manchester, Nashua, Derry, the southern tier. Barrington is very big by population. This is valuation. So this is the total value of all 5,000 parcels in Barrington. It's $1.4 billion. At that valuation, we're the 83rd percentile statewide. So there's 192 communities that have a smaller valuation and 37 that have a larger. This is land area. So at 46.44 square miles, we're the 80th percentile. And there's 181 communities smaller than Barrington and 48 larger. You look at the northern tier of the state, with the exception of a couple of our neighbors, there really aren't a lot of communities as big as Barrington in the southern tier of the state where we are. And so here you look at this 87th percentile, 83rd percentile, 80th percentile. By 3 of the probably most prevalent metrics, Barrington is very big. And then here's those 3 maps, and you see, Barrington is bigger than every one of those red communities in different categories. So now let's talk about the municipal tax rate, and this goes directly to your question, Mr. Bailey. So at $3 a thousand, we represent 15% of the total tax rate. So this bar chart shows all 230 communities in the state and what portion of their municipal tax rate is of their total tax rate. So we're 15%. That's the 6th percentile. So what that means is that there's only 12 towns in the state of New Hampshire that have a portion of their tax rate that's smaller than that. And you can see them on this map. And again, you look at that, half of those are in the northern tier of the state, and a few more are in the rural part of the western half of the state. And so that tells a really remarkable story about the services we're able to provide and what we do that, what portion of the total tax rate we do that for. So that doesn't tell the whole story, and we want to look at this data as it relates to population and valuation and land area. So this is corrected for population. So we're 32 cents for every 100,000 population. That puts us in the 8th percentile. And so there's only 17 communities that have a smaller municipal tax rate corrected for population. And again, look at that. You see those red communities: Concord, Manchester, Nashua, Derry, Rochester, Dover. All of these communities that are not in the same category as Barrington, but that's where our municipal tax rate falls. When it's corrected for land area, which is really important for the highway department, how much they're maintaining. So 65 cents per 10 square miles. We're in the 9th percentile. There's 19 communities smaller and 210 larger. Those 19 communities smaller, the vast majority are north of us and in the northern tier of the state, which isn't surprising. Those are the larger communities. So at $3, our municipal tax rate's $3. That puts us in the 10th percentile. There's 22 smaller and 207 larger. And again, those 22 small are generally north of us in the more rural parts of the state. So corrected for value, this is a really interesting one. So at 21 cents per $100 million of value, we're the 14th percentile. And if you look at this map, you can see 29 communities have a smaller municipal tax rate corrected for value. They're in the Lakes region. They're in the Seacoast. They're in Rockingham County. They are in the wealthy parts of the state, which is remarkable considering they have the ability to have a lower municipal tax rate because they have so much value. And again, these are the same communities that were so much more valuable than Barrington on the review of the percentile there. So again, here's this chart of where Barrington is in the red. We're very big. Where we are with our municipal tax rate, which is very small, which nobody's proposing to change that, right? I think that's a really positive thing, a good thing for residents, something that department heads have worked really hard at, the select board over the years. But I think it really tells a story about how much we're able to do with a very small burden to the taxpayers, which obviously most taxpayers pay their $19.85 per thousand and are concerned with that. Of course, we don't have control over the whole rate, just that $3 is what we have control over. And we work really hard to make it as reasonable as possible. So in summary, if you're going to remember the high points, remember that the budget is an 8% increase. Revenue is a 7% increase. We do a lot with a little. Barrington is big, but we work hard to maintain the rural character, and we have a very lean. So that's the budget hearing presentation. Happy to hear questions from the board and then from the community.
Excellent work. Thank you for laying it out so many different ways. So I think that really helps people see what's going on.
Great.
Thank you. I got more than what I asked for. I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's the goal.
I hope everybody else sees the same way.
Kudos to you and all the staff who have really put all the effort into making this happen.
Yeah, ditto here.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent. Public comment by those present. Anyone like to comment, question? This is a public hearing. We can discuss the operating budget.
And if you're participating virtually, you can raise your hand or press *6 to mute yourself. Wait to be recognized by the chair. Not seeing anything virtually, Mr. Chair.
You don't either. Please, I would entertain a vote to bring this to the deliberative session. Mr.
With, I would like to make a comment if I could before you call for a vote.
Please.
I do have some disappointments on the preparation of this budget, but I am totally satisfied the way the budget is. Some of my disappointments are we did not increase the spending for police department. We did not increase the spending for the fire department or the highway department. Of course, it's a 4-to-1 vote here sitting before you. I felt that we should have spent some more money. My colleagues felt differently. Maybe in the future we're there, but I can't tell you enough about the staff and how they came out. We had our first snowstorm here, shortly. They did everything with what they have, and well, that's all I have to say. But I tell you, they're a great bunch of people, and I would have approved more for them. Thank you.
Other comments? Hey, we have a, I'd like to move that we accept this budget before the deliberative session.
So moved.
Bailey,
Second.
Scapiello, second. Let's do it by roll call.
Scapiello, aye.
Gibson, aye. Sakosha, aye.
Bailey, aye.
Very good. That's covering the operating budget. There's more to come. Let us turn our attention now to the tax increment financing district. I think we all have thoughts on that.
I'd like to make a motion to present the town center tax incentive financing district to voters on the 2023 warrant.
Second.
Capella, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Go Shaq.
Bailey, aye.
And Shrek, aye.
Fantastic. We'll still spend a couple minutes talking about it, because we're gonna have a public hearing, right? Educate the community, give an opportunity for comment. So this is,
Technically, this isn't a budget.
no, it's a public hearing item, so we required RSA 162K
I'm sorry.
at public hearing.
Go ahead.
Okay, so tax increment financing, obviously, again, same as the budget review that we just did. The select board's very familiar with this. This is a public hearing, opportunity to educate the community and invite comments or feedback before it's finalized and put forward. So this really is an exciting opportunity for the town, something that the town has been working towards for a long time and hasn't really been able to get across the finish line. So the webpage up here, barrington.nh.gov/TIF, all of this information and more. The most important document on that webpage is the 18-page development program and financing plan. And that's ultimately what voters will approve when they vote on Article 9 in March. And so before we talk about the TIF district and get confused about that financing economic development mechanism, let's talk about the town center. And this is what Barrington has spent so long developing and really designing. And so the map you're looking at here is a zoning map and centered around the Route 9 and 125 intersection. And what you see in yellow there is the town center zoning district. The end of the day, what the town center is it's a zoning district, which we'll talk about what the origin was and why that's the case, but this is where it is. You'll see it's surrounded by some other zoning districts. The other big one here, the blue-purple, is the village district. So let's come back here. So the town center, again, we're talking the geographic center, what people think of when they think of the center of Barrington. They're thinking of this 9 and 125 intersection. And what the town center zoning district is, zoning sets separate land use rules for different parts of town. And the design of the town center zoning district was to maintain the rural character of Barrington by consolidating the mixed use development to this part of town and include generous civic use and open space. So there's an opportunity for a community to gather. And the background, there's kind of 4 steps, the 3 really, and we're at the 4th one now, to get to where we are. In 2003, the Barrington residents did a comprehensive update to the master plan. A lot of citizen involvement. And the biggest takeaway at that time, they wanted a quaint town center. And that laid the groundwork for, in 2007, the town hired a consultant to do a comprehensive visioning process for this town center to help design what the zoning would look like, what the goals were, what needed to be done. And so that happened in 2007. And each one of these is a link. This presentation's on the website, and you can look at those master plan updates and the town visioning documents. And then in 2008, the town adopted the town center zoning district. And like I said, this is maintaining rural character by consolidating mixed use development with a lot of civic use. And so this isn't my plan. This isn't this board's plan. This town center idea has been something the residents of Barrington have consistently said that they want and they support for years, and they've been waiting for it to happen. And so what the TIF district is we're at the implementation phase. We're at the phase where we need to make this plan happen for residents, and the TIF district is a tool to do that. So this is from that 2007 visioning process. This is an illustrative map that shows a quaint little town center around the Route 9 and 125. There's some frontage roads. There's a lot of civic use open space. This is another map. This shows development potential. So Route 125 goes north-south, Route 9 east-west. It shows that mixed use, the commercial development, the supporting residential development, connecting streets, things like that. So what did residents say that they wanted out of this town center? They said they wanted transportation improvements. They wanted it to be a safe, walkable town center with frontage roads or gateways. They wanted sidewalks or crosswalks so it could be safe for vehicles and pedestrians. I'll note that we recently had an applicant come before the zoning board proposing some development on one of the parcels down here. And the strongest negative feedback came from residents in the area that were concerned about traffic and pedestrian safety. And those are legitimate concerns because the road infrastructure down there isn't designed right now to support walkability in the town center. There isn't even a crosswalk to get from one side or the other of Route 9. And so it's a big impediment to the type of quaint town center development to not have those transportation upgrades. And that's what residents have said that they want all along. They said they wanted opportunities for active and passive recreation. The zoning district requires that every time you develop down there, you commit 15 to 25% of the land to civic use of open space. And that gives the opportunity for the town to come in and build the town green or the ball field or the pavilion or the gazebo, the gathering places in the town center to support that development that's happening. And indoor community space. This was a big one that popped up consistently. A community center, a senior center, a library, some combination of that in the town center to support the businesses and be a draw for that area. So let's look back at that map. These red circles are what residents said they wanted and where illustratively they showed up on that plan in 2007 and beyond. So we've gone over the plan. We know what the town center is, and there have even been more steps. So like I said, here we are in 2023. It's time, and we have an opportunity to make that happen. And the TIF district is a tool to do that. In 1988, the residents of Barrington, in their wisdom, adopted the provisions of establishing TIF districts. And never was a TIF district proposed. The enabling legislation was adopted by a large majority, and then it sat dormant. We talked about the 2007 Town Center Plan. There was another community profile in 2014 that said the same thing. 2019, Recreation did a needs assessment, strategic plan, over hundreds and hundreds of responses and involved residents, said the same thing. We've updated chapters to the master plan. We've done other zoning ordinance updates. And it's all said the same thing, supporting this idea for a town center. And so I see it's my responsibility and this board's responsibility to try to find a way to make that happen if residents keep telling us that that's what they want. And the biggest challenge of that is all the things that we just talked about cost money. And that's the biggest challenge when it comes to actually getting any of this done, which is you won't be surprised to know the purpose of the TIF district. That gives us this opportunity. So this is a way to get the money to develop the town center without increasing the taxes or being a tax burden to the rest of the residents by temporarily utilizing the increased taxes of development that happens, that incremental tax towards the development goals or whatever we're trying to accomplish. In this case, the town center. And so tax increment financing, that's TIF. It's a temporary economic development tool. So the idea is you come in, you make investments. So you use the added tax and reinvest that in the area to end up with more economic development or more appropriate economic development than would have existed if you did nothing, if you just left it alone. And it being temporary when you're done, the goes back to the whole town and to benefit the tax base overall. So it's for funding improvements, civic use and public facilities, utilities, transportation, and importantly, it's to develop and maintain those. So it's not just we're going to build a park, but it makes money available for maintaining that park and adding mulch every 2 years and, buying the Bobcat to plow the sidewalks, which is the biggest reason nobody wants sidewalks is because it's going to cost money. Well, this is an opportunity to utilize tax increment. So take the money the developers pay for the added value that they bring to town and reinvest it in that area to make it more desirable. And so it's a popular tool in New Hampshire. Most of the municipalities around us and a lot of municipalities throughout the state have used this to accomplish goals similar to this. And I think that was the idea back in 1988 when residents adopted it. So what does the TIF district do? There's a comprehensive frequently asked questions section on the website, barrington.nh.gov/TIF. Again, it invests just the new taxes. It doesn't touch the tax base that exists, but it invests the new taxes to promote smart development, establishes and maintains community space. It allows the town to develop partnerships to realize those broader goals of the town center so that we can work together to get the open space in the right areas and connect the transportation corridors that really achieve the vision of the town center, which again, the whole reason we're here is because people have this town center idea. If somebody doesn't buy into the idea that they want a town center in Barrington, they're not gonna like this idea either. But if, and as the majority of Barrington, when they've had the opportunity to opine, say they want this town center, this allows us to accomplish that. And again, at the end of the day, voters are in charge. Only voters can adopt or amend the TIF district. Couple important notes about what it isn't. Doesn't change zoning at all. We talked about the town center being a zoning district that exists. The TIF district does nothing to that. The zoning stays the same. Doesn't change property rights for the people in the district or outside the district. All the same requirements to the zoning board, planning board, et cetera. There's no increase in taxes. Everybody still pays the same amount in taxes. The only difference is the new value that developers create within the district is allowed to be reinvested during the duration of the district to promote the businesses that are going there and further increase the tax base. Doesn't create any special fees or assessments, and it doesn't decrease the funding to the school or the county. So it's, at the end of the day, this is a mechanism to accomplish the goal and the vision of the town center. There was a process. This started, the select board and planning board were talking about this town center and the need for a plan to achieve that goal. We had a variety of stakeholder meetings with residents and business owners, department heads, boards, committees, commissions, various other public meetings, and took all that input and put it into this development program and financing plan, which the select board adopted at their last meeting in December. So this is what the district looks like. So this again is 9 and 125, north is up. The purple shows the parcels which are part of the TIF district. It incorporates that town center area and also includes other areas of civic use or open space or areas that have development potential. So it's 205 parcels, about 1,200 acres. The baseline value is about $80 million. It's proposed to expire in 20 years. Again, it's temporary. There's no bond. The plan is to only spend cash that's available from development that happens within the district. And it's designed around this recurring vision of the Barrington Town Center. We've talked about this. What kind of improvements are we going to do? Civic use public facilities, recreation space, court, splash pad, park, playground. We're not going to do all of this, but this is what we've heard from residents, and this is what we'll be able to invest in the area to fit with the development that's happening. Utilities, transportation, et cetera. So again, how is it going to be paid for? Only new development or that incremental tax. As development is constructed, that incremental tax will fund the development program. There's an advisory board and the select board is involved in decision making. And then once the TIF district expires, all of the value will be added to the tax base. Who makes decisions? Again, voters are in charge. Only voters can adopt or amend the TIF district. If there's any need for a bond in the future, only voters will be able to do that, and it would require 60% majority. There's an advisory board made up of residents and business owners that are a part of every step of the process, and the select board is responsible for implementation. So this is what the warrant article would look like. Essentially does three things. It establishes the district, it adopts the development program and financing plan, and it gives the select board the authority to create the advisory board. And that's warrant article number 9. So happy to address questions from the select board and then the community after. Ms. Rayleigh.
Thank you very much. Going back to, as usual, the pages aren't numbered sometimes. Give me, under who makes decisions and changes. One of the questions I would have for you is that I understand the select board is responsible for implementations. And suppose a individual or a group of individuals, taxpayers from the town, decided that they would like to see that new game they play with a pickleball. That's it, pickleball. How did you know? Play pickleball.
Yeah.
And they decided they wanted to have a new they wanted to have a pickleball court. So how would that process be? Now, my way to look at that is that they would come here during public comment, talk to the board, and how would it get on as a warrant article? Would it have to go through the same way as everybody else did, a warrant article with the signatures and everything else and present it, and then go through the
Town meeting.
town meeting and everything else there. Thank you, sir. And should that be how
It's
it
a
would
good
be?
question. The short answer is no. That's not what the process would look like. So
Okay,
the money within a TIF district can only be spent for the items included in the development program.
yes,
And so the development program includes recreation courts, like a pickleball court. And so it wouldn't require further town meeting approval to use the funds to build a pickleball court.
oh, okay,
So how I would envision the process, the select board would have control of designing this process. But how I would envision the process is they wouldn't come straight to the select board, but they would work with the advisory committee. And in this case, the recreation commission, and recreation department. And ultimately, they can't do anything if there isn't a spot for it. And in that case, they would have to work with developers who are looking to bring projects to Barrington and have that 15 to 25% that they're required to commit. And so maybe somebody brings in, a proposal for a coffee shop and, like a little bookstore or something in a parcel in the town center. And they'd love to have some pickleball courts next to that because then they go to the coffee shop and, symbiotic relationship. Well, that creates the opportunity for the location. The recreation department and commission is involved because it's going to be their court. They're going to be managing it. They're going to be staffing anything, maintaining it, et cetera. Then they go to the advisory board and say, hey, we think this is a good idea. It's consistent with the development program. And then ultimately the select board, as advised by the advisory board, be able to make decisions. What would have to go to town meeting is, let's say somebody would want the town to build an indoor pool. No, that might be applicable. I'm trying to think of something really dramatic, but if there's something that somebody wanted to do that isn't included in the development program, then that would have to go back to town meeting to amend this document to include the ability to spend money for that purpose.
so, because some of the conversations I had, I just trying to get across and I assured them this is not a cash cow for the town to spend.
No,
Okay, that's what I was getting at in the long run.
no, and again, if there's no development, there's no money.
Yeah.
And so the only way it works is if the town is able to attract development to meet the town center vision, the town center objectives, and work together to reinvest the new value to support that development, period.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
Just comments. Thank you, Connor. I mean, from my perspective, for voters, after voting the budget, this is the next most important thing facing the town at this election.
Any other comment? All right, public comment. For any of those present that would like to address questions, answers as we can get them.
And if you're participating virtually, you can press *6 to unmute yourself or raise your hand using the Teams feature.
Okay.
I don't say anything,
Now-
Mr. Chair.
Actually, now is when we should vote on this. Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. Make a motion to present the town center tax increment financing district to voters on the 2023 warrant.
Second,
Moved and seconded, we have the vote.
okay, Capello, aye.
Gibson, I.
Coach,
Barry, aye.
And Sherrick. Very good. Then that will appear warrant at the delivery session. That's the noise ordinance while we're here.
Yes, it's another public hearing.
There is some history, and there is, one of the concerns is the current warrant articles that were proposed probably were in fact not legal. And I know that Chief Joy has worked in this proposed noise ordinance based on some previous working from Durham, I believe.
And Lee, yeah.
And these. Anyone from the board have the comments, questions? Not hearing, Joy Max there, yes, he is. I didn't find Mr. Hall, very good. Would you like to comment on this?
As he walks up, so the current noise ordinance is not legal because the select board in 2016.
One of those other locations better, for instance, agricultural. In Durham was not an exemption. In Barrington, it certainly should be. So I tweaked that a little bit. All of this is taken from other communities. It's based loosely on the disorderly conduct statute. As Mr. House pointed out, it's very subjective. The disorderly conduct statute is the same way if you read it. There's subjectiveness there, which allows discretion. Again, it goes back to the common sense of the officers involved. So that's built for a reason. I may use the disorderly conduct statute rather than our town ordinance, but this gives us a less intrusive measure to use in those situations where going right to disorderly conduct might not necessarily be the most appropriate action.
Why is the current one not enforceable?
A, we don't have the sound meters to use it. Two, it hasn't been passed by the town.
Well, yeah, I was hitting on the decibel point. They don't have decibel meters and the.
Do you have
current
anybody that can calibrate those?
Us?
Yeah.
No. In
Okay, I'm
town?
just asking.
Yeah, no, in town, I'm told there are individuals that could calibrate our decibel meters. However, like with anything else, those individuals are not from the state of New Hampshire. We have folks from the state lab come up and calibrate our intox. I can't call it a machine. They'll get mad at me. It's an instrument. It is calibrated by folks from the lab. Come up, take care of that. It goes down for a period of time. They let us know when we can use it again. The PBTs are calibrated. Our radars are calibrated annually. Everybody thinks they're calibrated daily. They are not. They are tested daily. They are calibrated annually. So all the instruments that we use for enforcement purposes are calibrated by known quantities. We don't have a meter. Even if we did, it wouldn't be calibrated, and I wouldn't know how often to calibrate it because there's no good litmus for that. Nobody else uses those decibel levels that I'm aware of. I'm sure somewhere out there's a town that has a noise ordinance that's based on decibel levels. I didn't go digging deep enough for it because it's not something I would do.
Thank you.
Did that answer? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you. We had a comment from the public about air brakes. It seems some of this is pretty general language. Would that be covered under that?
So the deputy chief and I, actually, it's funny, we were talking about air brakes yesterday. Possibly, again, it gets into basically, unfortunately, when it happens, we're gonna have to be there to hear it. If we were gonna go the air brake route, the Jake brake route, I've heard it called Jake brakes, that should be something that town should consider. Somebody with more historical knowledge than me, I'm looking at Chief Walker back there. Did we used to have air brake in place on roads like Toll End Road in the past, Rick, or was it just weight limits?
Oh, just wait.
It was just weight limits back in the day. I don't think we want to mix that. Yes, compression brakes are a noise issue. I think compression brakes, if it's something the town wants to address, should be addressed separately solely on compression brakes. Because we're not going to have the same type of levels and everything with compression brake. In my opinion, and maybe I'm out of line with other places, compression brakes is just gonna be a no. You're gonna post X area, no compression brake usage, and if compression brakes are used, they're in violation of.
And there's a pathway to do that. You mentioned Portsmouth, that's a good example. And there is a separate process. That doesn't mean that there might not be noise ordinances that are applied to, engine braking like that. But it'd be a separate process, and this board could certainly consider going.
And I'm certainly happy to do the homework on that. My guess is if I went to the well in Durham, I'd probably find something similar, and I know I can go to the well in Portsmouth now as well, so.
Yeah, you addressed the question I was gonna ask, and that is posting the area of concern that individuals might have.
For compressions?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we would definitely have to, we'd have to post that.
Specifically for the Jake brakes, as this gentleman here
Yeah.
brought up.
Well, I think that would be more of a Mark thing, right? Doesn't he do the signage for the town?
Well,
Right, yeah.
he would post them,
Yeah.
but, truck drivers would have to be notified, I think is maybe the point, and, to make it enforcement.
It would kind of parallel a no parking situation where we were tasked with enforcement and Mark is tasked with putting up the signs, Daniel Cater Road being a great
You
example.
could put it up.
I could, sure. I'll put the signs in all day long.
Yeah, and I would need an ordinance.
Correct.
Process. I'd have to- Any other questions for Chief Joy while he is here?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else with comments from the audience? Yes, sir, please. Can you come forward and give your name, please? Name and address, please. Instead of 10,
How are we doing? I am Morgan Carter. I live at 5 Smoke Street, Barrington, New Hampshire. My question was, how would one enforce engine brakes and know the difference between an engine and air brake? The only reason I ask this is because I drive truck every day. And how would one enforce the laws of an engine brake?
It's a great question. And so I think what the board discussed and we heard from the police chief is that isn't addressed in the current noise ordinance. And if the board is interested in going down that road, that would be a separate process that we would research. And that's a good question to put on the top of the list of researching, bring to the board for discussion, and then ultimately to the town to vote on an ordinance. And at the earliest, that wouldn't happen until 2024.
Okay.
But it's a good point.
I do believe there should be engine brakes in more rural areas, not like 125 or Route 9, but something like down Smoke Street or over Malago Road, where a lot of houses are next to each other, because they are quite noisy if you decide to use them.
And we wouldn't have control of 125 and Route 9 anyways, as state roads, wouldn't be a town jurisdiction. But yeah, so like I said, certainly if the board was interested in going down that road, we'll get the research done and bring an informed proposal to the select board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Those of you who are online, if you're on Teams, you'll raise your hand. Use the raise your hand thing. And if you're on telephone, it's *6.
Not seeing any virtually, Mr. Chair?
Very good. So, yes, sir, Mr. Bailey.
Can I make a motion?
You may.
Make a motion to present the noise ordinance to the voters on the 2023 warrant.
Second.
Happy LOI.
Gibson, I.
So go, Chad.
Bailey,
And chair time. Okay. Now let's address, rest of the warrant articles. I think we've done Article 8. Operating budget. We've had a discussion of the vote on that. We've had a vote on the town center. Article 10. Or do you want to start?
Yeah, brief introduction. We're actually going to record separate recommendation votes. So the votes that you've taken already are put them on the warrant. We'll take separate recommendation votes. So what I have is just a brief introduction to what we're doing different this year as it relates to warrant articles, specifically the use of fund balance and the tax rate impact. And then at the end, I have every single warrant article, the language of the article on the presentation, so we can go through them. You could do it one of a couple of ways when it comes time to take your recommendation votes. Your recommendation vote will be requested for Articles 8 through 27. You could do them all at once, opposed to doing it, 20 different times, or ask members to pull out any warrant article that they want to vote on separately. And so think about what you want to do, and then when we get to that, we can decide whether we're going to do it individually. Regardless, before you take your recommendation votes, we'll open up a public hearing for the warrant articles, and then close that, then take your recommendation votes.
Why don't we have discussion on each article as needed as we go through it, and then we can, if that's okay with the rest of the board, and we can lump them together. If there are changes, and we've discussed these at some length already as a board, we would like to have public comment as well.
Okay, so brief introduction, kind of what's different. So this is the entire warrant. Again, the warrant ends up becoming the ballot. This is what residents vote on. We have every single one of these warrant articles and details for most of them available at www.barrington.nh.gov/2023 warrant. Again, the reason we're having the little introduction here is because we're going to do things a little bit different based on feedback from residents and the budget committee as it relates to most of the warrant articles, the capital reserve contributions. And so we talk about fund balance every year. We're going to talk about it a little bit different this time. But when, our job, my job, the select board's job in good government, one measure of that is financial stability. And so we dedicate a lot of energy and effort to try to make sure we're doing right by taxpayers by maintaining financial stability. Part of that is a stable municipal tax rate, which we've done now for over 11 years. The unassigned fund balance is another big piece of that. This is cash flow. This is an emergency fund that in cases of severe emergency. And the DRA, Department of Revenue Administration, recommends holding 8 to 17%. And that's percent of the regular general fund operating expenditures. Barrington has a policy that we will maintain 12.5%, the midpoint of that range. So right now we have about 12.2%, which is where we typically are, right? Plus or minus 12.5%. And that's good. We're financially stable. So fund balance in Barrington has traditionally been used for capital projects. It's a responsible investment in capital projects while reducing the tax impact. And because the fund balance is the funding source. Fund balance is made up of unexpended appropriations, which are taxes that have been raised, and revenue in excess of projections. And it's a savings account, like I said, that maintains cash flow and for use in case of emergency. Keep in mind, to use it in case of emergency, you need the approval of the commissioner of the Department of Revenue Administration. It isn't just the board votes that it's an emergency and, we're going to use that to buy a police. So historically, Barrington has used fund balance anywhere from a couple $100,000 to over $1 million to fund these capital projects. And it's important to keep in mind that the select board doesn't get to decide to use it. It goes to voters on a warrant article, and the voters approve or disapprove that with the funding source indicated. This is that data on a kind of complicated chart, I guess, but the green line shows how much has been spent by voters at town meeting every year. The mustard line there, or the mustard bars there, are how much in dollar value the town has held in unassigned fund balance. And then that orange reddish line shows what percentage we've maintained. So you can see there's a lot of consistency there. And again, if our goal is financial stability, that's what we look for. So let's talk about where we are for 2023. So currently we're about 12.2%. By the time of tax rate setting in October of 2023, I expect we'll be at about 14.5%. So that's $688,000 above the 12.5% target. And so the select board at that time will have approximately $700,000 to directly offset the tax rate in 2023. And I'll touch on direct and indirect use of the fund balance. What Barrington has always done has been a more indirect offsetting of the tax rate. We fund warrant articles from unassigned fund balance, so that when the appropriation is made, it has that the funding source in place. It doesn't go to the tax rate and then is bought down. We utilize the fund balance as a funding source. That approach helps achieve voter support for financials, smart financial planning, to set money aside for fire trucks or highway equipment, et cetera. The direct approach would be to wait until tax rate setting and then use any portion of unassigned fund balance at the time the tax rate's set to offset the tax rate and buy it down. And that's what the select board, on the advice of residents and the budget committee, that's the approach that the town is taking this year. And so unassigned fund balance will be used to buy down the tax rate at tax rate setting. And it's the caution, the cautionary tale, and it's something that happens in municipalities all the time, is if it's not managed properly, it can introduce instability. Because if you say, I'm going to spend $1 million to buy down the tax rate this year, and then next year you don't have that $1 million, all of a sudden you've got to make up that $1 million and whatever your increases are the next year, and that's how you get a tax rate that goes like this. It's not good for escrow accounts. It's not good for financial stability, and the longevity of the town. So it's estimated, again, about $700,000 will be available in October. So how I see this happening is voters are going to look at all the warrant articles. They're going to see the tax rate impact. And what the budget committee advocated for is seeing that tax rate impact on the warrant article is more transparent, because it gives them the ability to see in real dollars what that warrant article costs. Whether their tax rate is actually going to go up or not is not what's important, but the fact that they see that. And so then warrant articles will pass, some may fail, and then in October, the select board will revisit this fund balance amount, and the select board will say, okay, we have $700,000 above the 12.5% midpoint. We're going to use that to buy down the tax rate. And then instead of the tax rate going up 75 cents, it goes up 12 cents. And because the fund balance was used to offset those appropriations. So instead of doing it on the warrant article, we're doing it later. Same impact, but the point is that it's a more transparent process for voters. And so we've all agreed to try that this year. So let's talk about those warrant articles. So we have warrant articles that come up every year. These are reoccurring warrant articles: the bridge and culvert capital reserve, highway heavy equipment, fire truck, fire rescue equipment, dam repair, police equipment. The paving article, like I said, that $100,000, emergency communications, the transfer station recycling center, library and community center, library technology capital reserve. So those are the ones we're familiar with. New articles that have a financial component, I should say. First, the energy capital reserve. So the select board established an energy committee. One of the big goals of the energy committee was to make the town of Barrington more efficient, save us money on our energy costs, and also educate voters how they can also save money. So they've asked to establish a capital reserve, and they intend to use this money to perform energy audits of municipal facilities in order to make recommendations on how we can save money and become more efficient and save us money, essentially. And the second article is the police collective bargaining agreement. So again, we talked about implementing the wage study. The select board extended an offer to the police union to open up negotiations so that they could be offered the recommendations of the wage study. That contract process was very smooth, but because they're a union, the police collective bargaining is a separate warrant article, and this appropriates the funds to fund the increases in the police department, which will help ensure recruitment and retention in that department. So in total, if every single warrant article passed, it's $1,053,542 of warrant article appropriations. And so if we circle back to that 688,000, which that's a very conservative number. I don't expect it to be less than that, and it's likely that it will be more than that. But conservatively, that leaves $364,000, which would be on the tax rate, which represents 26 cents or $83 on a $325,000 property. So that's what's different. The last point that I'll make is that the budget committee presented the warrant articles, capital reserve requests, to the select board in the priority order that they identified. So historically, we've presented warrant articles to voters in descending order of dollar amount. This year, they're presented in priority order. So the earlier articles on the warrant for the capital reserves are the warrant articles the budget committee recommended as a higher priority. The select board didn't change that back in December. You could change that now. But that's an important component about taking this approach, different than how we've done it in the past, is it's possible that as residents get down farther in the warrant, and, you know, they're voting yes, it's possible that they see tax impacts on articles and are more likely to vote no later on. Whether that happens or not, I really don't know. But that has been brought up, and for that reason, they're listed in priority order. So that is the introduction that I wanted to do. I guess maybe before we get to all the articles, I'll just touch on the articles that we can do nothing about, just for awareness purposes. Article 1 is always the election of officers. This year, we have 2 select board seats for a 3-year term, 1 seat on the trustee of trust funds for a 3-year term, 1 on the cemetery trustees for a 3-year term, and 2 library trustees for a 3-year term. The filing period starts January 25th and goes through February 3rd. Important to note, on February 3rd, the town clerk's office is only open from 3 to 5, and they're only open to accept applications for a term of office, not for other town clerk business. So again, we have no control over this. Other articles we have no control over is the zoning amendments. As we've discussed, this is the purview of the planning board. The planning board held their public hearing on January 3rd, where they finalized the zoning amendments to put to the warrant. At that meeting, they removed one of the articles and voted to recommend Articles 2 through 6 unanimously, and Article 7 was recommended by a vote of 6 to 1. And so those articles will appear on the warrant on the ballot in March as written. Those can't be changed at deliberative session, unlike the rest of the warrant. And again, the select board has no control over this. Well, I guess except for Ms. Capiello, since you're the ex officio to the planning board and got to participate in the whole process. And so if anybody's interested in the zoning amendments, I would encourage you to watch the video recording from the January 3rd public hearing. And they had separate meetings earlier in the process where they talked about them. But the January 3rd meeting is a good summary of what they ended up with for zoning amendments. Okay, thank you. And I think you were saying you were going to ask if there was any questions for individual articles.
As we go forward, I think that would be, make it.
Okay, I don't plan to go through them anymore.
Okay.
All these is just the plain text of what the warrant article will look like. So I'm happy to take questions now, and I can scroll to it, and then when you're ready to vote, you can.
Okay. This is the one we discussed earlier. This is about the operating budget. And from the board, comments from the audience, comments for those online. I hear no comments.
Similar.
Yeah, does the board have to vote in support of it so it can appear in the pieces sent to it?
We're going to take your recommendation vote tonight. Yes, like I said, you can either do that by saying, you know, recommend all of them, or I'd like to take this one off. I think Mr. Mantrick was suggesting going through them individually.
If we go through them individually, why don't we just take the vote, sir?
Sounds right.
Okay. All right. So it'd be a motion to recommend approval.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval of Article 8 operating budget.
Second.
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia.
Yeah,
Thanks, Rick. On. Go 5-0. That will appear on the warrant, but the select board recommends 5-0. The ABC will meet tomorrow, and they will make their recommendations, which will also appear on the warrant as it comes to the delivery session. Town Center Tax Increment Financing District.
Make a motion to accept Article 9 Town Center Tax and Increment Financing District.
second,
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia.
Bailey, aye.
Are there any other comments from the public?
How'd you vote, sir?
and Tricon.
Thank you.
Article 10, Bridge Culvert Capital Reserve.
I'd like to make a motion to present Article 10, Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve.
Is there any comments from the, oh, excuse me, second, are there comments from the public? Online,
No, sir.
Roll call.
ready to vote?
Capiello, aye.
Gibbs and I.
Sakosha.
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. For 11, Highway Equipment Capital Reserves. $100,000.
11 is 200,000, sir.
I'm sorry.
That was my bad. I skipped too far.
Yeah, don't do that.
I won't.
Thank you.
Like,
I just looked that.
we'll let it happen again.
I just saw that number. And I go, whoa.
Make a motion to accept Article 11 appropriating 200,000 to the Highway Heavy Equipment Capital Reserve.
Second.
Are there any comments, questions from the board? From the public? Hearing none?
Capiello, aye.
Gibbs and I.
Sakosha.
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Article 12, Fire Truck Capital Reserve. Now, $100,000.
Heard that.
I move to put forth the fire truck capital reserve on the
Second.
Seconded, comments from the board? Comments from the public? I see no comments. Vote,
Capiello, aye.
Gibbs and I.
Sakosha.
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Article 13, Fire Rescue Equipment Capital Reserve. This is different than the fire trucks.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded, comments? Questions from the public? Sir?
What's the amount? Please
Oh, I'm sorry, 100,000, or
Yeah,
10,000,
10,000.
10,000, excuse me. I had the first number right, the zeros threw me off.
Relative.
Yeah. That's 10,000, yeah. Any other comments, please? Ready to vote?
Capiello, aye.
Gibbs and I.
Sakosha.
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Dam repair, engineering replacement capital reserve for $150,000.
So moved.
Second.
Comments, questions, public comments, questions? Going through this, great. Nothing online?
No, sir.
Very good. Thank you, vote.
Capiello, aye.
Gibbs and I.
Sakosha.
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Police equipment capital reserve, 11.
11,000. I know, it's tough because
see it.
I know that line reflection from the is right through the number for you.
No, this one I got, $11,000.
So moved.
Second.
Capital second. Comments from the board, questions from the board? From the public? I hear nothing, I see nothing coming up. Vote,
Capiello, aye.
Gibbs and I.
Sakosha.
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Article 16, paving related roadworks for non-lapsing article. This is for $100,000.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? This is not exactly the same as the other warrants, and this is a non-lapsing appropriation.
Which does in fact lapse, but just not at the end of the year.
Exactly.
In
Yeah,
2024.
Connor, can you remind me, how is non-lapsing different from capital reserve?
Yep, the fact that it does lapse, a
Okay.
little misnomer.
Okay.
Yeah, so non-lapsing articles, financial mechanism, that allows you to make an appropriation that lapse on a date certain. I think they limit it to 3 or 4 years. A capital reserve is until it is closed or
Okay.
changed.
This is 12/31/24.
Yeah, so the reason this article is important is because when we do paving, we can't know for sure, like roads don't fit in nice neat boxes, like it's 50,000 to do every road. So when we get through the paving season, towards the end, it's like, okay, well, we can pave that road, it's gonna cost $20,000, but we only have 18. Or it's gonna cost $20,000 and we have 30. So by having an appropriation that lasts 1 or 2 years, then we can make up the difference. So we can spend 80,000 of that and know that we'll have the other 20,000 available the next year. So this non-lapsing appropriation is always the last one that we spend. So that we use the appropriation that expires at the end of the year and have that flexibility to add a road or do a smaller road.
Yeah, the regular part of the operation. Plan sort of, depending what the weather is, what the costs are. So, any questions from the comments from the public? Seeing none, hearing none, shall we vote?
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, I.
Scotia,
Haley, aye.
Manshirk, aye. Emergency Communications Upgrade Capital Reserve, $50,000.
to approve?
Second,
Seconded, comments from the public? Any other questions from the public? Vote,
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, I.
Scotia,
Haley, aye.
Manshirk, aye. Transfer Station Recycling Center Capital Reserve. $25,000. We have this.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions, comments, public comment, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote.
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, I.
Haley, aye. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Haley,
Manshirk, aye. No vote. Okay, Library and Community Center Capital Reserve, $25,000.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments from the board, comments from the public.
right here.
Sure, I'm sorry.
I don't support this warrant because, from my knowledge, we don't have a community center. If we did have a community center, it would be this board's responsibility, so I think that, sending the wrong message to the voters.
Any other comment?
What was the verbiage for last year? When they presented the warrant.
The purpose statement was relative to the design and construction and furnishing of a library community center. Is that your question?
It's not it's a roundabout way it is. Did it specifically say this last year, Library Community Center Capital Reserve?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's all I was asking.
Yeah, I think that capital reserve title has been in place for several years.
So this would be the third year.
Yeah.
It was established with 25,000. There was 20 added last year. And this article proposes to add 25.
I think they also have expenditures of 39. They talked about already for new design. Yeah.
From my recollection, they haven't spent any yet.
No, I'm not talking about
The
spending.
redesign quote that they got. Yeah.
Just so it's transparent, in case the voters are online looking at the amount change. Originally, when there was somebody else doing, the proposal, it came in at, $48,643. New management stepped in, dropped it down to 25, but I think the community center should be removed out of there because we don't have a community center. I pulled up the library's website. It says Barrington Library. It doesn't say Barrington Library and Community Center. That's my opinion.
I think the intention was to plan for the possibility of the community center last step was put in the original capital reserve.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Connor, but once and I've heard this through many people, once you tax community center on there, then it would go through, it would be the select board's responsibility to uphold and kind of do the day-to-day there.
So there's some truth to that. It comes down to what the statute says about the management of facilities and the duties and responsibilities of the select board versus the library trustees. So the library trustees are a separate statutory board that have their own authority. They have the authority of the operations of the library, and that doesn't change. What changes is like the situation that we're in right now where the municipal facility that houses the library includes recreation. And so statute and case law says that the select board has jurisdiction over that facility, that it's a town facility under, at the end of the day, under the jurisdiction of the select board. Now, in Barrington, in practice, the select board and library trustees have a good working relationship, and they're good tenants in a town building. It's what is different is if there's a building that a standalone building that is just the library. The statute and case law makes it clear that that building is under the jurisdiction and control exclusively of the library trustees. I think the point or part of what you're saying, I think, is that if a new building were built and it were a library community center, now it's a combined building with a combined purpose. I think that there would be, I think that similar to where we are now, where the rec building has more than just a library in it, that could be construed as a municipal building that has a library in it.
Well, I mean, just some simple, at a community center is a building, a group of buildings for community, for educational and recreational activities. And then you go under what is a recreation center. And a recreation center is a building that is open to the public where where meetings are held, sports are played, and there are activities available for young and old people. So. My opinion.
I think further, I'm sorry, thank you. I think during the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've talked about this, and community center has come up to be, with the library being there, has been the responsibility of the select board. It's what it ended up being was there, because it wouldn't be a separate entity. It would have to work through the select board, but I still think a sum of 25,000, as I said before, should be different, but it's not the time to change it now.
Any public comment? Yes, Ms. Gabrielle.
Hello,
Hi there.
Susan Guardiello, and I'm chair of the library board. I think one of the things that I think haven't really tackled well in this town and in the discussion is the definition of a community center. We keep using that term, and I think Mr. Sakosha gave some very good guidelines about public meetings, educational, recreational, and many libraries, particularly I think in smaller towns, have, if not renamed themselves, referred to themselves as library community centers, because they do play both those roles as a traditional library with books and materials and so on, offer a lot of educational programs, socialization activities, things that you might think of like the mahjong. Playing mahjong at the library is very common in our library and around the state. It's truly more socialization and recreational, the kind of thing you would assume would take place in a community center. So perhaps that's a task that we really need to tackle together. I think the community, from research that we've been doing, is looking for, books, materials, socialization, educational programming. And the libraries try to provide those services and also collaborates a lot with the recreation department in recreational activities as well. So personally, I don't think it's harmful to leave the library and community center verbiage there. I think the town is kind of accustomed to that. I do think going forward, you've raised a lot of good questions as we design something, and to the extent that we design it in collaboration with the town. We've heard a lot what has been coming out in the master planning activity, which is, I think, very interesting and informative. And we'll see down the road what we can build into that and the sort of the oversight of that. As Mr. McIver mentioned, I think over the years, we've worked very well with the town. We've always been in a town building. Our general MOU that we should probably take another look at and refresh is generally that the town takes care of the outside of the building and the mechanicals. The library takes care of the interior of the building. And whether that will be what comes forward in a new building remains to be seen as we develop that.
Might have lost that where you guys really wanted the highway department to pay for that bench. You know what I mean? That kind of set a precedence, right?
I hope not. You know, I think the whole snow removal issue and that maintenance of the outdoor space is, I guess, is something we've grappled with over the years. And sometimes the library's taken on a lot of that responsibility. For example, maintaining the grounds. I think other public buildings, the town is taking care of the grounds. At the library, even though it's outside, we're using volunteers. The bloomers are fabulous, and others to try to keep the outside of it looking okay. I don't know if I've responded to your comment, but I'm hoping going forward, we continue to have good relations.
I hope it gets better with the highway department, you know, as far as even putting in the smaller building out in the parking lot and communicating with plowing, you know, before the snow flies. I think that would be a huge step for the library.
Yes, and also, as you know, I asked you about performance under some of the RSAs. And the last time there was extra money in your budget and you used it to promote several people as far as their levels go with pay raises and what have you. And it shows up here, but the RSA clearly states that it should have been discussed with the budget committee, but we don't have a budget committee. We have an advisory budget committee, so that leaves that up. But also asked that you discuss it with the select board. And the only discussion that I recall, the select board was given notice that this is what you were going to do. So I really hope that in the future, a better communication can get there on how the taxpayers' money is being spent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And my only response to that is that we should probably all take another read through of the RSA relating to the authority and responsibility of the library trustees relative to budget, salaries, and so
Well,
on.
I didn't say you didn't do it wrongly or unlawfully. I'm just saying that it's recommended that your discussion be with the select board, which didn't happen. I didn't say you did anything wrong.
No,
Except you didn't discuss it with the
we,
board before you made it, you know. And as you know, Connor is our representative, our daily representative for this. That would have been fine as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I'm getting at. Thank you very much.
Can you explain to me, for the town, why originally the budget came out at 48,000 and then what?
I'm not familiar with that 48,000
Yeah,
number. What did I
75.
miss?
It was 75, wasn't it?
I
There,
think,
there was an
Select
initial
Person
request.
Suppose, I think he might be looking at the operating budget request.
The amount change?
So I think,
I do know that relative to the warrant article, the initial request from the trustees was for an addition to the capital reserve of $75,000. When we met with the ABC, we quite honestly made it clear to them, knowing the financial pressures that were forthcoming and the needs of other departments, that 75,000 was not, you know, it would be nice to have that added, but it was not critical to have that level of support. And we are content with the recommendation of the ABC at 25,000.
so I forget what the number was at the beginning of the process, but I think what number he's looking at is that when the original library budget proposal was submitted in September, it was more than 48,000, and then it was reduced to 48,000, I think sometime after Melissa left and the library trustees took another look at the budget. Was that your question, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah, with the operating budget, we made a large number of changes in the budget.
Well, it just makes you nervous, you know, who was at the helm before, and then, you know, some greater decisions came through, and, you know, I appreciate you looking at it.
We think we came up with what was an efficient budget that we can manage next year. And As you may know, we are still in search for a new library director. Fortunately, we have filled finally the other positions. I think the last of those new positions, I think the person is starting tomorrow or the next day. So we'll have a full staff, except we are still absent a library director. And other staff are still filling in to keep things moving along, and they've been fabulous. I really can't say enough about the rest of the staff, particularly Wendy Rowe and Amy Inglis, have really done a fabulous job for us.
I honestly believe if this is the best move for Barrington, it will happen.
I hope you're right.
Any other comments? Any other questions from Ms. Cahill? Any questions for us? Mr. House, right behind you. You want to talk
Thank
to
you.
us? Please.
Mike House from 48 Serenity Way. I just want to go and make one comment that as a former military member and occasional program manager, mission creep and project creep are detrimental to going and accomplishing your goals of that. So trying to go and combine the library with a community center with what have you is probably not going to be the best way to go and get it done. Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone in the audience? Anyone online? Seeing anything coming up? All right, it has been moved and seconded that we approve warrant article 19 to go to the deliberative session. Ms. Capiello,
Hi.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia, no.
Bailey, no.
Mancheck, aye. Energy Capital Reserve. This is money to be worked on the possibility or on surveys of
And we talk a lot about warrant articles, and I'll use this opportunity to emphasize the single most important component of a capital reserve is the purpose statement when it was initially established. The title doesn't matter, what it says in future warrant articles doesn't matter. And so a great deal of time and effort is spent crafting purpose statements that encompass what the funds plan to be used for and could be used for. So the purpose statement in this sense is for the purpose of funding renewable energy projects and outreach initiatives related to increasing energy efficiency and or reducing energy costs for the town. So inclusive in that, and the immediate plan is to spend the money concerning energy audits. But that purpose statement, if this is established, will live with the capital reserve forever. It could be changed in 5 years. The title could be changed to the Renewable Energy Capital Reserve. And it still wouldn't change the fact that it can only be used for this. And the police for that purpose statement is your trustees of the trust funds. When they get an appropriation request, their duty is to look at the original purpose statement and make sure it fits with the proposed appropriation.
Just allows them to do their business. And it's for $10,000. Any questions from the board? From the public? Online? Nothing. Vote.
So moved.
Have to,
Oh, did we?
no, we haven't.
No, I moved. I'll move it.
So I'll second.
Okay.
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia,
Bailey, aye.
Library Technology Capital Reserve for $3,000.
Moved, so moved.
one second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. Comments from the board, questions from the board? Comments or
I think
questions
the
from the,
presentation was good.
yeah, from the audience, public? The online? Hearing none?
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia,
Bailey, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Police collective bargaining agreement.
So moved.
second.
Question. Mr. Joy.
I feel like I probably ought to say something.
No, don't feel that way.
You've been hanging around Rick too long.
Yeah, so I'm aware that the town and the union both prepared statements essentially to educate the public and to show their support of this. As the police chief, I'm kind of in a weird situation at the negotiating table. I'm not there, quite frankly, for the best interest of the town. I'm not there for the best interest of the staff, for the best interest operationally. You've heard me bring up retention, and recruitment. This contract was hard negotiated by both sides, as far as I'm concerned. Everybody was cooperative and intelligent sitting at the table. And what you have before you is a good contract negotiation, which A, helps employees, B, takes care of the town. Nobody won everything that they wanted, certainly. And more importantly, it goes to retention and recruitment. Quite frankly, the contract's allowing me to open discussions right now with folks. So for what it's worth, the police chief thinks this was a good idea, and I'll leave the rest of it to everybody else.
Any other questions? Public comment.
Are you able to just elaborate
Can
on?
you come to the table just so the microphone can hear you? Sorry, thank you.
Are you able to elaborate on this article just a little bit?
Yes,
That's fine. You were part of the negotiating.
like I said earlier, the select board invested in a wage study in 2022, which surveyed comparable communities in the state and compared our wages to theirs. They made recommendations for changes in wages to make sure that we were comparable to the labor market. The select board included those recommendations in the operating budget for all employees. But because the union is under contract, any contractual component would need to be changed by a change in the contract. And so the select board offered the opening of negotiations. The police union accepted, negotiated the wages, which were the carbon copy of the recommendation from the wage study. And they also negotiated for a couple of other items, an increase to the outside detail rate, a slight change to how holiday pay is calculated. So police officers are paid for all 12 holidays, regardless of whether they work them. In the idea that if they are scheduled for the holiday, they have to work and that's their schedule, different than other employees. So that was always based on 8 hours. So a 96-hour payment essentially, but there were 12-hour shifts. And so that was increased to 10 hours. And the amount of comp time that they're allowed was increased from 40 hours to 80 hours. That helps offset overtime. And so those components in the contract were negotiated and tentatively agreed by the select board and the police union. And what this warrant article does is it asks voters to approve the cost items of that contract. And so it's not necessarily approving the contract itself because the voters don't have control over anything except the appropriations. What this warrant article says is that the anticipated cost of the contract of the cost items is just under $70,000 in 2023, $48,000 in 2024, and $31,000 in 2025. And in 2023, it appropriates that $70,000. If approved, it appropriates the $70,000 in order to implement it.
Okay, so basically just kind of like the wages of the police officer.
Yes, wages and a couple of other things, wages and benefits, it encompasses it all.
All right, thank you. You're welcome.
Any other comments from anyone present? Vote online. Hearing nothing. It's been moved and seconded that we bring this before the deliberative session and the voting session.
Mr. Chairman, I request we wait for Mr. Scotia to return.
Temporary recess.
Yes.
We can talk about Article 23 if you want.
Talk about Article 23. Yeah, this actually is kind of related.
Very.
So basically, if the voters reject Article 22, this authorizes us to renegotiate. That's necessary. It doesn't cost. Correct.
It says warrant article.
Yeah, I'm checking if that's just a
Yeah.
It's typo.
typo in my presentation. I'm checking the actual warrant document, which is the one that matters.
22.
Yeah, it's 22 in here. Where it matters, it's right. So
Okay,
my apologies.
It actually says
because in our
the same
handout, it says 21.
Yeah, but then also.
I mean, it says 12. It's 12.
Well,
Oh, it says it twice and it says 12 in one place and 22 in the other.
right,
Okay,
Jim.
I'll fix that. Thank you.
No, we're just waiting for it. That's
Yeah.
for the original agreement. We haven't discussed it's 23, but I think that'll be pretty straightforward. Ms. Campiello.
Aye. This is for 22.
Yeah, this is for 22.
Gibson, I.
Scotia.
Haley, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Now 23, we've just been discussing. Any other questions?
Move the article.
Second.
Any comments from the public? Here online? Not getting much there. All right, been moved and seconded, we pass Article 23 on to the public.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, I.
Scotia.
Haley, aye.
Mancheck, aye. Article 24, service-connected total disability credit.
So moved.
Second.
This has been a progression of the last 3 years?
3 years.
Yeah. Any questions about this?
So this is the last of the 3 years.
4,000 is the current state maximum. So it's possible that there'll be legislation in the future that increases that credit allowance, but the state allows a maximum of $4,000 right now, and this would go Barrington's credit to that.
Any other questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, vote.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, I.
Scotia.
I will make notice that I do receive this and I will vote aye.
Mancheck, aye. Article 25. All veterans tax credit. This is again, another one that's been moved and was proposed to move up every year for the last 3 years. This would be the final. I think 750 is the max. That's correct.
And if I could just say something on this one. So the state law changed last year relative to the all veterans credit. The law changed the eligibility requirements for the all veterans tax credit. They expanded the eligibility to include current service members and service members that had a shorter tenure in the military. And so unfortunately, the way the legislation was crafted and adopted forces communities all across the state to readopt the all veterans tax credit in order to continue offering it. And it's a silly thing, but there's a lot of buzz in veteran circles about the all veteran credit and the need for communities. I've already been approached by quite a few veterans in the community because they've heard that we need to do this. So this article does two things. It readopts, which is what's required in order to continue offering it because of how the legislature changed the eligibility requirements, and it increases to 750. So it's easy for us because we were planning to have a warrant article anyways. In communities that weren't planning to increase it, they need to make sure that they have a warrant article in order to continue offering it. And that's why the veteran interest groups have been, rallying their members to make sure that they understand and communities understand. And so I don't expect this article to be changed at deliberative session. But if there is any desire from the floor to change this warrant article, I would encourage the board to push back and at a bare minimum, include the readoption so we can at least continue offering what we offer now. I don't expect that to happen.
I was gonna say, if we don't re-adopt credit, then it goes away.
Which is a silly thing. Wasn't the intent of the legislation, but just, typical bureaucracy.
This article does both.
Yeah, so it does work.
The way it reads now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Questions from the public? Comments? Hearing none, vote.
So before I vote, I just want to state that my household does receive all veterans tax credit. I vote aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia.
My household also receives this. I vote aye.
My household also receives this credit. I'll vote aye.
Who was the second? Jim moved it? Was it Rob?
I don't think anybody seconded it.
I'll second it.
I heard Mr. Justin, yes.
Yeah. There we go.
We need to vote again, or is that vote stand?
Not a total stand.
Thank you.
Fiber to home non-binding agreement. This doesn't cost any money at this point.
So moved.
Second it.
I have the questions from the board about this one. I think we discussed this last week, last meeting, right?
Mhm.
Question from the public. Comments from the public. Hearing none.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia.
And Chair Conley.
Bailey, aye.
Bailey and I, yep, sorry. Okay. Article 27, the noise ordinance. Chief Joy discussed earlier.
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments from the board? From the public?
Make note of the comments that was presented to us in,
Public interview.
non-public, excuse me, public quick comments.
A public
Sorry,
comment portion.
not non-public, public comment.
Public.
Yes. That'll be.
All right.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia.
Bailey, aye.
And Chair Conley. Article 28 is new and it revolves around the waste management contract, which we have not had a chance to discuss.
So we'll talk about that in new business, and if there's interest in it remaining on the warrant, they get there, then the select board can take a recommendation vote at that time. That'd be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think we've gone through the warrant articles. Next is the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the January 10th, 2023 consent agenda A through G as presented.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Question? Oh, sorry.
It's just a question, ladies and gentlemen, it's the fact that, because it includes, the minutes of a board meeting that I wasn't here, am I allowed to vote here? Bailey, aye. Thank you.
Good question.
All right, appointments. We have none.
No, but I will say, we're getting to that time of year for appointments. We process all reappointments in March. And so in the boards and committees that you're on, go back to all them, make sure they're thinking about whose terms are expiring and who's interested in continuing. And if you know people that are interested in joining a board or committee, now's a good time. They still have time to go to a meeting or two, meet with the chair, things like that, make application for. Thank you.
Just on that point, the transfer station committee has 2 openings. Yes, sir.
Just so everybody is aware, I will be submitting my resignation effective March 1st for the CBA. I have health factors that just prevent doing that. That's all I would say.
There's another hope.
Better not see you on the pickleball court.
The only reason I'll be there is to pick up somebody's ball that left there.
Pick up the pickle.
Yeah.
Administrative reports, Mr. McIver.
Yes, thank you. So first meeting in January, we have 3 employees currently in our tenure who started work in Barrington in January. Tyler Rand in the fire department for 14 years. Cody Guile, who was recently promoted to a full-time firefighter EMT in the fire department, started in the town 6 years ago. I think that really speaks volumes to the on-ramp that Chief Walker is able to manage with our call members and our part-time members. That's a pretty common theme of people starting out in town. The chief gives them a chance, gives them some training, helps get them exposed to the industry, and then they end up coming to work for us, which is great. And Erin O'Day is the recreation administrative assistant. She started 3 years ago this month.
Question,
Yes, sir.
is Aaron's time here correct?
Erin O'Day.
Oh, I'm
Recreation.
sorry.
Okay, so ask the town, which Just a little teaser. I'm pretty sure Ask the Town is gonna go through a rebranding in its infancy. Pretty sure it's gonna turn into Ask Barrington. Most people that have talked to me about it have called it Ask Barrington, kind of, it's a little bit more specific to Barrington. So when you see that happen, don't be surprised.
So you have to change the logo and everything.
Big happenings. Well, I made the logo, Microsoft Word special. So, but so yeah, biggest things happen in Barrington right now are the change, the rebranding of Ask the Town. Okay, so some of the topics we covered over the holiday weeks. Why was this meeting on Tuesday? Great answer, good details. You'll find that on the town's website. What is the Barrington Town Center, which is actually a really good one, topical to the TIF district. You have to understand the town center to understand why we're proposing a TIF district and how we'll accomplish that. When is a driveway permit required? Why aren't there solar panels on the new town hall? What positions are up for election in 2023? Does the town replace damaged mailboxes? Which Mark will be the first person to tell you we don't ever hit mailboxes. And he'd be lying. But those answers are there, and I will continue to encourage anybody who has questions, send them along. If folks ask you all questions, it's a great place to send them. We get back to people pretty quick, and it's a great way to get that information out to the rest of the residents as well. And that's all I have.
Ms. Powell?
2 items for wet signatures today. They're around somewhere.
Here.
One is an application for current use for map 11 lots 10 and 11. And then there is an employment agreement. That's it.
She even included a pen.
I'd love it back.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Oh darn. Okay. I think you just got the old one. Joyce, I think you're the only one.
Is it coming down this way?
I think Ben. I think you only have to sign one. You only have to sign one.
There's
That is the payroll changes.
there's 2 spots in that.
God bless you.
There's 2 spots in that one for
Everybody
you, and
has
then
to.
she'll have.
Hallelujah.
Oh, I'm sorry. you do.
Just give it to me.
Ben.
I'll take a look at what I'm signing.
Okay. No old business. New business is the waste management contract proposal.
Like me to introduce?
Mark, would you please?
Okay, so brief history, how we got to here. You'll remember that earlier, well, we'll go a little farther back. In 2018, the town entered a 9-year agreement with Waste Management to take and transport our trash and recycling through December 31st, 2026. It was a great contract, well negotiated, approved with a large margin by the voters. You can see a copy of that. It's linked in my report. In April, Waste Management sent the town a letter and said, hey, because of inflation, we'd like to respectfully request you give us a 3% additional increase on top of what's in the contract. You'll remember that Peter LaChapelle, our public sector representative for Waste Management, came to a meeting in May and explained all the reasons why that was necessary. And they're very legitimate. Price of fuel's going up, price of labor is going up, all the rest. The select board decided on the 23rd that, hey, we're under contract and we owe it to the residents of Barrington to maintain that contract if it's in the best interest of Barrington. But instead of just saying no, the select board said, hey, it'd be good for Barrington to extend the contract because we know waste capacity is going to be an issue. And so the counter offer to Peter LaChapelle and Waste Management was we'd be willing to entertain an increase with a contract extension. Because again, we talked about good government earlier. If we have a really good contract now, and then we get a new contract in 2027 and it costs $300,000 more, now all of a sudden in one budget year, we've got to come up with $300,000 just for the transfer station. And that's can be bad government. And so we kept asking questions and we weren't sure that we would have a proposal. But just last week on Thursday, the transfer station administrator and I met with Peter LaChapelle, and he presented us what is Waste Management's first and last offer for a contract extension. He made it clear, not in a mean way, but that it wasn't subject to negotiation. What they would propose for a contract extension. So the good news is that their proposed extension goes through 2031, which is again great because that gives us an opportunity to have a contract for a number of years. But that's where the good news stops. The rest is all bad news. And they have proposed a huge increase in the first year, starting what would be in 2023, and then an average of 5% and 7%, depending on the waste stream or the cost item through every year on average through the end of the contract. And additionally, they proposed a fuel surcharge, which would work both ways. If fuel is more than $4, we would pay more. If it's less than $4, then they would give us a refund. And so you have a copy of the proposed numbers, and you also have a copy of the fuel adjustment example in your packet. So we were able to call a meeting together of the Transfer Station and Recycling Center Committee on short notice yesterday, which they met, and we discussed this in earnest. We discussed most specifically the quick analysis that I performed, and I included that table in my town administrator report, basically showing what the cost difference was of the current contract versus what they proposed. And I told you there's no more good news after 2031. What they proposed would cost the town of Barrington approximately $272,000 more just through 2026. And obviously, there's no basis for comparison through the balance of the contract because we're no longer under contract. And so the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee discussed it. Their biggest concern was that they felt that Waste Management was applying current inflationary numbers through the entire length of the contract, which is incredibly unlikely given the unprecedented high level of inflation right now. And so for that reason, among others, they unanimously recommended that the select board not accept or move forward with the proposed contract extension. The last door I'll crack open, and it's nothing that we're going to do anything about this year. But if we don't move forward with this contract extension, we're still going to have to be prepared for 2027, having our costs increase dramatically. And I say a couple $100,000, that's not unreasonable at all. I think it's very likely. We have a very lucrative contract right now, which is great. And it was, like I said, well negotiated. But if we have to spend $300,000 or more in one budget year, that's going to be a tough sell to voters. And so there's a couple of things that we could do maybe starting next year, which is why I'm cracking the door open. We could consider setting up a revolving fund in the transfer station, or what's called a special revenue fund, which would essentially allow us to set money aside, fees from the transfer station aside, in order to be able to utilize those during the 2027, 2028 timeframe to basically phase in the dramatic increase. So if the increase is $300,000, maybe we target to have $200,000 available, so that in that first year, the only increase to the operating budget is $100,000 or something like that. And so while we still have some time in order to put a plan together like that, my recommendation would be to first stay in the current contract and focus on how to manage 2027 and a new contract, opposed to accepting the contract extension as proposed.
Who else is out there for us to go to at 27?
Casella is probably the most likely service provider that provides hauling and a destination. One of the tough parts is, Mr. Babe, economically, we'll be hard pressed to have somebody more competitive than Waste Management. You'll see in the document here, the biggest increases are in their hauling. That's where a majority of the money is. You can't get any closer to a landfill than Barrington is to Turnkey. And so the Casella, they ship their stuff far away. And we're talking northern New Hampshire. And so Casella might be able to offer us less of, a more lucrative tonnage rate. It's unlikely, just based on no specifics, it's unlikely that they'll be able to beat Waste Management on transportation. And so I don't think we have any interest in souring a relationship with Waste Management. And I think it's likely that in 2027, we'll have a new contract with Waste Management. But we'll stay on our current contract until then is what I'm proposing.
Yeah, because I know during his presentation, he was very careful to make the presentation of the 3 areas in Massachusetts that shut down.
Mhm.
And now if you watch the trucks that come up, it's like a summer ride with all the cars. They're all Massachusetts coming up here.
With Jake breaks.
And they're coming up the boat.
Yeah, yeah, but, it's, I understand it, but, I think it's time that we really have to sell this project so people know we're trying to save them money, but the consequence is gonna be this. But then again, there's gonna be an election, so you don't know what's gonna happen in the election, you don't know what's gonna happen to the price of gas.
Yeah, so the select
So
board.
you're saying that's the kind of gamble we're gonna have to take?
Yeah, so what I'm saying right now is that the select board has a choice before them tonight, whether or not to present this option to voters on the warrant in 2023. My recommendation is that you don't offer it to voters because I don't think it's good for the town. But it's up to the select board whether or not this would be a warrant article.
In your negotiations, do you have any sense that they wouldn't work with us in some way to continue to take our waste?
No indication. What Waste Management and Peter LaChapelle has indicated is that, this is in the news on a almost weekly basis relative to the landfill crisis in New Hampshire. They're permitted right now at turnkey through 2036. And their last permit expansion or extension, I'm not really sure the right way, they gave them more capacity and more time. But was hard fought. I mean, they had to buy up over 100 acres of land in order to get it. And so I don't know how likely it is that they will have an extension beyond 2036. They don't know. Something's going to happen in the waste. Barrington has a really good compared to a lot of communities that are either farther away or Waste Management has a waiting list for adding contracts because of their capacity issues. And so I didn't get any indication that if we didn't accept this extension, that Waste Management wouldn't be interested in continuing our business.
Right,
continuing
they wouldn't
business
take
with
us off the
Barrington
list.
in 2027.
Yeah.
But what I think would happen, and this is just business 101, right? If we went to them in 2025 or early 2026 and said, we want a contract proposal for 2027 and get something from Casella and all the rest, Waste Management's going to look at Barrington and say, hey, we've lost this much money from Barrington over the last 3 years. And we're going to build that into a contract extension or to a new contract. So 5 years, we're going to, push that out over 5 years, and that's going to be that much more we are paying. So I have no doubt that we will pay for it. But I guess the point I'm making is paying $272,000 more in the next 3 years, while we could save some of that money and help phase it in, probably better, but I don't think they're going to drop us.
Are they still, just off the different question, are they still selling the gas to UNH for their heating systems?
I believe so.
Are they? Yeah. We lost out on that too. We was gonna have it down here years ago. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So any other questions? Still public hearing?
No, I mean, you're welcome to, but it's not.
Okay. I would suggest no. Make the motion either.
Remind the chair that we cannot have negative motions. That's part of our rules.
I know. No. Just in case we can just say we're not accepting. So we have some sort of motion here. We want to vote on this stuff.
I'm gonna recuse myself because I do work for them.
Make a motion, we remove Article 28 from the warrant. Waste management contract extension,
Moved.
to remove that,
Yeah.
remove it from our 2023 warrant. So Article 28 would be removed, Article 29 would become 28.
All right, I'll second that. We probably need some more work on this.
So, unless you want to table, we can table, but I think we probably need to. They have a date that they want this.
The problem is it needs to be ratified by town meeting,
Yeah.
and so, this is your chance for 2023.
That's right, yeah, because we'll not have another opportunity to put this for the public. They have to approve it anyway. So I think we need to vote. It's been moved and seconded that we remove Article 28. Consideration, make Article 29, Article 28.
I'll second that.
Second. Votes.
I vote yes to remove it.
Yes, Teresa.
Scotia recused.
Bailey, aye.
Bailey, aye. Mancheck, aye.
Okay. We'll contact Waste Management, I'll let you know what they say in response.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, like I said, I think we've opened the door. I think there's other things that we should explore and continue the conversation with Waste Management. Very good.
All right. Time for a public comment.
Select board reports and concerns.
I'll step first. Yellow.
No, planning board, sure, we had, an open meeting for the public on the warrant articles. Primarily, we did it on this.
Conservation met December 22nd, and they're working on their end of year report. They were talking about the wetland buffers, Richardson Dam, monitoring conservation land, variety of stuff there. Their meeting this week is canceled. Their next meeting will be January 26th. Energy Committee met on December 15th and January 5th. On December 15th, they elected officers. Paul Panish is the chair and Dan Federico is the vice chair / secretary. And then most recently, January 5th, they've been working on discussions around Community Power Coalition. They'll be presenting to the board soon with some of the ideas that they have. We're also focused on working on the website for the Energy Committee to really get out what we're doing and so that's transparent and available.
Things are all good at the rec. Basketball is up and running. We started an adult chai tea program today. The staff also went to a conference last week to get some good, information. There's also a Valentine's skate February 10th with a bonfire. DJ and Hot Mess Poutine truck will be there.
Take the ice.
Mayor,
Any guys commissions?
Yeah.
fun to have food.
Good change to do a lunch,
Accepting nominations, sorry. I nominate you.
I had ZBA meeting I went to, we had 3 articles to discuss. 2 were approved and 1 was disapproved.
The transportation, that you've heard most of that report. We also discussed making, separating out cardboard. We'll get more on that in a little bit because there may be some additional monies involved. We're also going to discuss raising the price of bags. The bags green bags now cost the same as they did in 1991. Yeah, but we're losing money at a fairly high rate, so we're gonna address, right, consider. A recommendation approved. ABC will meet tomorrow to make their recommendation. The school board had their budget hearing on the 3rd of January. Just to put it in some perspective, their budget proposal is 27 million. Somewhere in that vicinity. I'll give you the exact numbers. $27,817,221, which is $232,646 more than it was last year, which would be a 0.8% increase. A little more transparency, they no longer have the bond payment. They finished their last bond payment. So the actual operating part of their budget actually increased about $980 million, $980,000, almost $1 million, which would be about 3.2%. Off the top of my head, in their operating budget. Most of that apparently is from the teacher contract, and they're going to try to they're going to increase their paraprofessionals because they're having a lot of trouble keeping paraprofessionals. That's their proposed budget this year. Thank you. Actually, that's my report. Now. Okay. Second public comment. Again. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My family had the opportunity, I don't know if it's an opportunity, but had to use the ambulance service this past week. And I want to turn around and commend the people that came to my house. I had 3 individuals that came there. Our family has sent a letter to Chief Walker and received a response, but I can't thank you enough when I say that safety in Barrington is paramount, and I just hope that future board members that are running for re-election and or election will continue to support them. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment online? Oh, Mr. House. Excuse me.
But he's,
I think you spoke on the first
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry. You were up.
Was that at a public hearing or the public comment?
Go ahead.
It was the first public comment.
Mike House for 48 Serenity Way. I just want to let you know that on or about the 19th of November, someone decided to go and fire a gun through my mailbox. There's 2 bullet holes through it and 1 in the support. And I just want to let you know that they probably don't agree with my particular politics or my stand on anything, but I am not going to back down to any threats. So just want to let that be publicly known.
Yes.
Did you file a police report?
I did go and contact Chief George.
That's the only thing.
Our next Sergeant Baker handled it off the top of my head.
Thank you very much.
If you're participating virtually and you want to make a public comment, you can raise your hand or press *6 to unmute yourself. Speak up, wait to be recognized by the chair.
I don't see any comment. Oh, there's a hand, their hand there.
Oh, I think that's just the cursor.
Oh.
It's utilized though. Hey, listen.
There was the line through it again.
Yeah.
Go and get it up. Okay, I don't think there's need for a non-public.
No, sir.
I will give these to you to hand to the supervisor of the checklist, please.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
yep, the other one.
Let's go, Shay.
Aye, Bailey,
Hi. Thank you.